What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and today I want to try and dig into a really juicy topic that might be a little bit divisive. I've seen some conversations circling about the fact that it seems like Fortnite is actually starting to die off. The fanbase is still probably 20 or 30 million strong, but it seems like about 10 million people have quit over the course of the last couple months, and people are sort of scratching their head and from the outside wondering what could have happened. Now, the main reason people think that the game is starting to die off is the fact that it seems like the hype is basically evaporated. People are not talking about it the way they once were. In fact, even major streamers and content creators who specialize in discussing and playing Fortnite are seeing their views absolutely plummet. And I think that a lot of this comes down to three main things. First and foremost, Fortnite is something that seems like it is very heavily directed towards a younger fan base. True, there's people like me who are in their 30s and play hundreds and hundreds of matches, but for the most part, I would actually bet money on the fact that the biggest bulk of Fortnite players are probably children under the age of 13. And I think the reason for this is that tons and tons and tons of kids previously were growing up with Minecraft. They had this way to play co-op stuff that had crafting and good stuff that let them do things that were constructive and destructive at once. And I think that Fortnite has managed to fit into that same mold and sort of harness that same audience. And I don't really see this as a bad thing, but I do believe that it's made it where just trying to make random friends in the game has become very, very difficult. In just random matches, I will often be called a dummy old man 7 or 8 times just by little children in every single round. I have actually now made it a point where if I'm playing on any console, I will immediately create a private party with just myself so I don't even accidentally hear any of this voice chat. Because if somebody's name is I Nutting Your Girl 69, it's probably a 9-year-old in New York who wants to try and insult me with dirty words that I have to Google later. Now, I'm not saying this as an old man, but I do think that there is definitely an audience that is turned off by the idea of playing with children. Which is ironically why I think that games like Splatoon 2 have been so successful, is that they don't have voice chat, but they have accidentally garnered a very adult audience. Most of the people who play that game online seem to be very artistic and very hardcore, people who want to play that game hundreds of hours and get tons of splats, all in an effort to be the best squid kid ever. Whereas Fortnite, it just seems like it's losing its vision a tiny bit, and I notice this more than ever when it comes to the fact that it is constantly and completely changed. Now, originally, many fans, myself included, were completely enamored by this. If you enjoy playing Fortnite, there's a good chance that when you pick the controller up, next week, you're going to be playing a totally different game. Right now, I can enjoy this cool ninja costume and a special new game mode they just introduced, which has been where you're trying to steal a giant crystal and get it to a van and try and escape as quickly as possible. But here's the thing, all that content that you know and love is very likely going to be completely replaced in the next matter of weeks or at most months. It creates something that I hear a lot in the writing world, actually, which is content fatigue. You see, the human mind definitely is built to try and understand a finite amount of ideas simultaneously. If you just think back, imagine some of your favorite fiction novels of all time. They probably start off by establishing a universe, maybe outlining a really cool magic system, and over time trying to expand that. Whereas something like Fortnite, it seems like they're constantly trying to just smash entire chunks of the world and rebuild it. And it's something that does eventually cause some form of mental exhaustion. At the start, I was totally on board, but it seems like as soon as I start picking up the latest gun and trying to master it, I do feel a little bit let down that in a matter of weeks, it may end up just disappearing, even though I spent all that time training with it. A recent example is definitely the drum gun. I loved this thing and I used it non-stop. And suddenly, as of Sunday, they just up and tapped delete forever erasing it? What about remote bombs? What about jetpacks? What about the fact that there used to be remote control missiles? There used to be wall traps that would shoot electricity, and this stuff just keeps getting ripped out of Battle Royale very, very quickly. I've definitely seen a big conversation in the Fortnite community about the fact that every season it seems like the game is trying to be a totally different project. And it's something that definitely seems like it is now catering to a very, very hardcore but very small demographic. You eventually are going to try and drift into this game and out of this game. Since it is free to play, I have seen a giant amount of people who just pick it up, try it out for a while, and then put it down later. And if the next season manages to just be slightly alluring, they're probably going to hop on for a bit. But there is always the looming risk that the game, again, at any time will completely change at the drop of a hat. One of the worst times I ever had with this is when they started trying to experiment with different control styles. And overnight, they completely reworked how the aiming functioned, and I could not get a kill at all for days until I managed to experiment and find that correct sensitivity combination once again. It is frustrating to play a game that randomly will just be switched around on you. The final thing I want to dig into, and something I think that's probably the biggest problem for newcomers, is the fact that Fortnite is certainly a game with a very, very high skill ceiling, and I think that that's definitely for the best. If you've never heard that term before, it essentially means that this is a game that you can play for hundreds and hundreds of hours, and you will continuously improve. You can learn things about all the different gadgets, weapons, and of course, the construction itself. Every single week, they're trying to introduce new elements to combat that you yourself can try and learn to be a better player. Just today I was actually trying out the new grapple hook, and being able to slingshot myself around and then get kills like I'm Spider-Man with a shotgun is fantastic. And I realized that if I got good at that, I would be able to completely change the nature of fighting. But there is a downside to this, which is that I think that people have begun to shift themselves into separate categories of play. There are the builders that some people like to insult by calling them Bob the Builders, people who constantly throw up entire giant structures as the drop of a hat, or other players which like to play it a little bit more loose and fast, worrying more about aiming than they are about construction. But here's the issue, there is definitely a big emphasis on building as a talent. If you are good at throwing up walls, 10 out of 10 times, you're probably going to beat somebody who's just running at you, even if they happen to be the world's best Call of Duty player. Now, this isn't necessarily on its own a detriment, but I think it's now creating this space where people are a little bit put off if they just pick it up. About 1,000 times now, I've heard the phrase from people, both hardcore and casual, I would play more Fortnite if they introduced a mode that didn't have building. And I think it all comes down to the fact that I like to describe it as the fact that in this world, there are more bricks than bullets. If you are very good at building defensively and constantly putting up destructional things, putting up obstructions in the path of somebody trying to hunt you down, you are going to get some easy kills and eventually some easy wins. I was watching a recent tournament of the Fortnite Grand Finals, and people are just building basically office cubicles, thousands of tiny little 1x1 gaps with roofs, every single thing they could to try and stack stuff on top of them. And it made it where when people were just trying to play it, it was nothing but a giant building war. And I think that the audience was turned off by it, and the players only seem to have this one skill set. Now, I'm not at all saying that they need to remove construction or reduce the amount of material so people aren't building as much, but I think it makes it where the people who become the truly skilled individuals who master the art form of quick building are going to be so infinitely better than casual players. Casual players will never even be able to catch up. And it just creates an interesting duality between those who are good, those who are starting out, and those who are probably going to quit because so much is changing so quick and they just can't keep up. But these have just been my 2 cents as somebody who has played way too much Fortnite Battle Royale from literally the start. But what do you think about this? Are you actually even convinced the fact that this game is sort of starting to die off? Or do you think that it'll be around in 10 years? I bet that Fortnite is going to exist for another 2 or 3 years until something bigger comes up and consumes them. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Whew. I got this video done right as my low camera button popped up. So yeah, I'm going to press stop right now. Oh, hi. I'm just working on the next video. If you want to see what it is, go ahead and click this button and you can subscribe. Also, if you click these video links, you can see my latest review and my latest top 10. Now I'm just going to sit here for a minute and wait for you to subscribe. Oh, I guess I could put on these giant glasses. I literally found these on a roller coaster.